Surprisingly, not every Beatles song was a favorite among the band members, and Paul McCartney would later reveal that there was one track he couldn't stand, even decades after it was released. For years, fans wondered if he would ever open up about which song he disliked most. But he stayed quiet, making offhand comments in interviews that sparked all sorts of rumors. Eventually, McCartney decided to come clean, and finally talked about the creative struggles he faced during the final years with the band. He described sitting in the studio, listening to the rest of the group insist on recording a song that he secretly thought was too simple and lacked the kind of musicality he preferred. Worse yet, he admitted that he tried to change parts of it and make it better, but nothing seemed to work. The more they played it, the more it grated on him. Years later, he confessed that he never grew to like it, even after the song became a favorite among many fans. He still thought the lyrics were clumsy and joked that he wished the band had scrapped it for something else. When pressed about why, McCartney said that even the process of recording the song felt forced, and while he respected how much people loved it, he could never quite get past his own feelings. Starting in Liverpool in 1960, the story begins with young musicians searching for their sound. John Lennon, eager to make music, gathered friends in 1957 for a skiffle band called the Quarrymen. During a local church fete, he met Paul McCartney, who quickly impressed Lennon with his skills and joined the group. Their shared love of music and talent for songwriting began to shape the direction of the band. Soon, George Harrison, another gifted guitarist from Liverpool, joined in 1958, bringing further depth to their little band. Over the next years, the group experienced several changes in its lineup as various musicians came and went, but the core forged through the close friendship of Lennon, McCartney, and Harrison. Eventually, with the addition of a final member, and after experimenting with different band names, the boys settled on calling themselves the Beatles in 1960. From that point, their identity as a band solidified, allowing them to move forward together as a single unified group that would later command the attention of the world. Back in 1962, the Beatles took their first big step into the music world when they signed with EMI's Parlophone label. This partnership led to the release of their debut single, Love Me Do, on October 5 of that year. The sound of Love Me Do was unlike most pop music at the time, blending simple chords with catchy vocal harmonies. Paul McCartney's clear voice paired smoothly with John Lennon's, creating a warm and fresh style. While Love Me Do charted modestly, it showed hints of the excitement and originality that would soon define the band. Not long after, the Beatles recorded Please Please Me as their follow-up single. This song was more upbeat, driven by energetic harmonies and a bolder melody, and the response was huge. Please Please Me quickly climbed the UK charts, becoming the Beatles' very first #1 hit, and causing a surge of popularity for the band. Because of this momentum, their debut album was recorded quickly to meet the growing demand. The album, also called Please Please Me, captured the youthful energy of the band, and it wasn't long before it reached the top of the UK charts, where it held its spot for an impressive 30 weeks. After Ringo Starr, whose full name is Richard Starkey, became the drummer for the Beatles in 1962, he quickly found his place in the group, both with his musical style and relaxed personality. Pete Best had originally held the drummer's seat, but Starr's arrival changed the band's dynamic, giving it stability and a characteristic beat that contributed greatly to their sound. His drumming provided a reliable backbone, letting the other members focus on melodies and harmonies. When the Beatles first came to the United States, Ringo was there at the heart of the action, sitting behind his drum kit on The Ed Sullivan Show. This moment was a turning point for the band, and for music worldwide. The televised performance, seen by an estimated 73 million viewers, ignited a wave of excitement across America, ushering in the frenzy known as Beatlemania. Audiences were taken by the band's energy and charm, and Ringo's relaxed style helped win over fans just as much as the group's catchy songs. From that moment, it was clear that his joining the band was the perfect fit, supporting the group through its early days of incredible success and media attention. Meanwhile, in July 1964, the Beatles' third album hit the shelves. This album, A Hard Day's Night, also served as the soundtrack to their very first feature film, which carried the same title. The film itself captured the excitement, chaos, and humor of Beatlemania, showing Paul McCartney and the rest of the band navigating fame in a lively, fast-paced way. Both the film and the album quickly became massive commercial successes. Audiences were swept up in the energy of the moment, and the catchy songs made their mark on listeners everywhere. Paul McCartney, as one of the key songwriters, played a major role in shaping the sound that defined this period for the Beatles. At the same time, as their fame soared, the constant pressure and exhaustion started to catch up with them. Later that year, in December 1964, the group released their fourth album, Beatles for Sale. This project signaled an important shift in their music. Although it topped the charts and sold very well, the music revealed a sense of tiredness, reflecting the band's fatigue after relentless touring and publicity. The shimmering sounds and upbeat tempos were still there, but beneath the surface, there was a new depth and complexity to the music. Paul McCartney's contributions during this period captured both the highs of commercial success and the beginnings of change in the group's artistic approach. This transition point in their sound hinted at more growth and experimentation yet to come, all shaped by the whirlwind experiences and challenges of this moment in their career. During the mid-1960s, Paul McCartney and the rest of the Beatles embarked on a creative journey that changed popular music forever. When they released Rubber Soul on December 3, 1965, everything sounded different. This album showed how much the group had grown, especially in their songwriting and approach to music. The lyrics explored new themes, moving away from the simple love songs that filled their earlier albums. The sounds on the record were more experimental, using uncommon instruments and unique recording techniques to give the songs fresh textures. Critics and fans noticed the difference right away. Rubber Soul was not only a commercial hit, selling millions of copies, but it also showed the group's willingness to take risks and try new ideas. This set the stage for what came next. Less than a year later, on August 5, 1966, the Beatles released Revolver, their seventh album. For Paul McCartney, this was an opportunity to push boundaries even further. Revolver was filled with bold experiments. The songs made use of classical music influences, bringing in string sections and even some orchestral arrangements that added depth and drama. Paul and his bandmates didn't stop there. Indian music found its way into their work, using instruments like the sitar and new rhythmic patterns that gave some of the tracks an otherworldly feel. The studio became a place to create sounds no one had heard before, as they mixed in tape loops, backwards recordings, and effects born from their curiosity. Psychedelic rock gave the album a colorful, almost dreamlike quality, yet every song was crafted with attention and care. Because of these groundbreaking techniques and the sheer quality of the songwriting, Revolver is often considered one of the greatest albums ever made. It left a lasting impression on musicians and listeners alike, influencing countless artists across different genres and decades. Combined, Rubber Soul and Revolver represent Paul McCartney's creative growth during a key period in the Beatles' history, showing how new ideas and experimentation can transform not just a band, but all of popular music. After endless shows filled with screaming crowds and excitement, Paul McCartney and the Beatles faced mounting problems during their live tours. In 1966, their fame had grown so big that even hearing themselves play became impossible because of the roar from the audience. Traveling from city to city took a toll, and each concert seemed more stressful than the last. Safety concerns grew too. Large crowds were sometimes hard to manage, and there were moments when the group felt threatened, struggling to move from stage to their cars while surrounded by fans. It was no longer about the music, but about surviving the craziness of Beatlemania. Their final concert at Candlestick Park in San Francisco became a turning point. On stage that day, Paul McCartney knew things had changed forever. The band realized that these wild touring days were behind them. Stepping away from the public eye, Paul and the rest of the group shifted their full attention to creating music in the studio instead of performing live. This decision allowed them to experiment and develop new sounds that had not been possible on the road. Free from the routine of concerts, Paul McCartney explored his creativity even more, helping the group produce songs that shaped popular music for years to come. Although released in May 1967, the album Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band stands out as a high point in rock history, being widely recognized for both its creative ambition and technical innovations. The album moves through different musical styles, taking listeners on a journey that was unusual at the time. It uses various studio techniques that had not been used in this way before, drawing on rich sound effects, careful layering, and inventive editing. Each song brings something unique, while still linking together in a way that tells a bigger story. For these reasons, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band often finds itself at the top of lists, mentioning the most influential albums ever made. After Brian Epstein died of a drug overdose on August 27, 1967, The mood among the Beatles changed. Epstein had been more than a manager. He was seen as a unifying figure who helped guide the band through their meteoric fame and unpredictable pressures. Without him, disagreements and uncertainty within the group began to rise, even as they continued to be successful. Though they all felt his absence deeply, the Beatles kept moving forward, managing to come together long enough to complete the Magical Mystery Tour project. This included both the album and the adventurous television film, both released in 1967, bringing a swirl of psychedelic sounds and colorful imagery. The film's surreal style sometimes left audiences confused, but the songs like I Am the Walrus and Hello, Goodbye became defining hits of their era. Despite the shadow that Epstein's death cast over them, the Beatles didn't stop innovating. The following year, they created their own company, Apple Corps, aiming to control their music while exploring new creative and business opportunities. These events marked a turning point, pushing the Beatles into new territory as artists and businessmen, all while trying to adjust to a world without the man who had helped hold them together. During 1968, the Beatles found themselves in a period of dramatic creativity and change. After traveling to India, they worked on a new set of songs that displayed a surprising mix of musical styles and moods. This effort resulted in a double album simply called The Beatles, but it quickly became known as the White Album because of its plain white cover. Inside, listeners discovered a collection of tracks that veered from hard rock to gentle ballads, from playful experiments to deeply personal tunes. These songs did not just reveal the individual talents of the different band members, they also hinted at growing disagreements and strain within the group. Each track seemed to reflect the shifting relationships among the four, making this album feel like a window into the band's changing dynamic. Around the same time, the animated film Yellow Submarine came to theaters and added a new chapter to the group's history. This colorful movie, full of imagination and unusual characters, helped cement the band's connection to a sense of playful fun, while also featuring familiar music that audiences recognized and loved. Over the years, Yellow Submarine became a cult favorite, remembered for its unique style, inventive animation, and the way it captured the spirit of the late 1960s. Both the White Album and Yellow Submarine showed how the Beatles were willing to try new things and push artistic boundaries during this turning point in their career. After a decade of shaping modern music, the Beatles reached a defining point in 1969. The band, including Paul McCartney, famously climbed to the rooftop of the Apple Corps building in London and played their final public performance. This rooftop concert, featured in the Let It Be documentary, captured a sense of spontaneity and farewell as fans crowded the streets below to listen to what would become an iconic moment in music history. That same year, the group released Abbey Road, marking their 11th studio album. Abbey Road stood out not just as a critical triumph, but also as a commercial powerhouse, quickly becoming celebrated for its rich sound and enduring tracks. Songs like Come Together brought a cool, effortless groove, while Here Comes the Sun offered a bright optimism that listeners treasured. These tracks, among others on the album, highlighted the band's chemistry as well as their individual talents. Although the Beatles recorded Abbey Road as their last studio album, its legacy has remained cherished by generations. Following the release of the album Let It Be, and its accompanying documentary in 1970, fans gained insight into the Beatles' difficult recording sessions and the internal struggles that ultimately led to their breakup. The dynamic within the band was complex, as each member faced their paths post-disbandment. John Lennon emerged as a prominent peace activist, using his platform to promote messages of peace and love until his untimely murder in 1980. Ringo Starr, known for his lively personality, also found success with a solo career, contributing to music and entertainment in various ways. George Harrison enjoyed a prosperous solo career, highlighted by his hit My Sweet Lord, before passing away in 2001 from cancer. In contrast, Paul McCartney took to forming a new band called Wings, which allowed him to explore his creativity further. He also continued to release solo albums and maintain an extensive touring schedule, captivating audiences around the world with his music and enduring legacy. Each former Beatle carved out distinct careers, while their collective impact on music history remains undeniable. Back in the early days of the Beatles, the demand for new songs was constant and unrelenting. Their manager, record label, and fans were always looking for the next hit, so the group constantly faced time pressure in the studio. Paul McCartney, known for his steady stream of melodies and ideas, sometimes found himself having to write songs quickly, not out of inspiration but because a deadline loomed. One clear example is the song, "I'm Happy Just to Dance With You." This song was written in haste, mostly to fill space on the album, and to give George Harrison a song to sing. Paul never liked this track, and often spoke of his dislike for it, since it felt forced, and far from his best work. He didn't see the tune as authentic or meaningful, and it was born out of necessity rather than genuine creativity. At that time, the band knew they needed to keep up with the demand for new music, no matter what it took. The song's rushed nature, along with Paul's dissatisfaction, made it one of those tracks that stood as a reminder of the heavy expectations placed on the group in their early years, when quantity sometimes came before quality. Later in the Beatles' career, Paul McCartney talked about songs where he and John Lennon wrote specifically to showcase George Harrison on vocals, such as "I'm Happy Just to Dance With You." This song, according to McCartney, was intentionally made simple so that Harrison could handle the lead, since George wasn't yet a main songwriter for the group. At the time, it was sometimes necessary to fill space on albums, and Lennon and McCartney often came up with songs quickly to meet the band's recording needs. In interviews held years later, McCartney became increasingly blunt about how he actually viewed "I'm Happy Just to Dance With You." He described it more as a workmanlike track rather than a passionate piece, sometimes going so far as to say it was a filler tune that lacked emotional or lyrical depth. McCartney admitted that, at the time, getting albums finished meant creating songs that weren't always inspired, referring to this song as an example where the focus was on giving George something to sing, rather than crafting a memorable or deep composition. This opinion sets "I'm Happy Just to Dance With You" apart from the Beatles' more celebrated work in McCartney's mind, reinforcing that not every Beatles song was made with the same artistic intensity, and sometimes practical needs led to less memorable material. Throughout his career, McCartney's high standards for songwriting have been clear in the way he values emotional depth and artistic quality. He often expresses dissatisfaction with songs that, in his view, do not meet the level of creativity or feeling he strives for in his work. Early in the Beatles' journey, pressure from the music industry created situations where compromises had to be made. McCartney recalls moments like the creation of songs such as "I'm Happy Just to Dance With You" as reminders of how the Beatles sometimes had to make quick decisions to keep up with industry expectations and deadlines. During those years, efficiency and speed often trumped perfection, leading to songs that might not have met McCartney's personal standards for emotional resonance or artistic achievement. He has spoken about his preference for songs that offer more substance, suggesting that certain pieces from the early Beatles catalog do not align with the depth he later aimed for as a songwriter. These experiences shaped McCartney's approach, encouraging him to hold his work to a high level and to avoid the feeling of compromise. Even while the Beatles were producing hit after hit, the demands from managers and record companies meant that not every song could receive the amount of time and care he wanted. This awareness drove him to set a higher bar for what he considered finished work as his career progressed, reinforcing a personal code of quality and sincerity in music. Although many fans cherish Paul McCartney's vast catalog, even he has a list of songs he doesn't hold dear. Reflecting on his career, he has sometimes spoken about tracks that never quite matched his high personal standards. He has mentioned his dislike for songs like "Hold Me Tight," "Little Child, Your Blues," "What You're Doing," and She Said," and he's grouped these with "I'm Happy Just to Dance With You," all for different reasons. "Hold Me Tight" was considered by him to be a song that never really came together, and he felt it was somewhat forced onto an album to fill a gap, rather than being a piece he was proud of. Similarly, "Little Child" lacks the spark he seeks in his work, and reads as more of a filler than a highlight, something he would have left off if there had been stronger options at the time. "Your Blues," meanwhile, comes from a period when the Beatles experimented with different sounds and attitudes, but McCartney wasn't fond of the result, feeling it strayed too far from his own preferences. "What You're Doing" suffered in his eyes for being repetitive and didn't have the inventiveness he strove for, so it felt half-baked to him. In She Said, while others have praised the song's mood and construction, McCartney has spoken about not connecting with the recording and believing that the track did not quite capture the energy or quality he wanted. Across this collection of songs, McCartney's reasoning is often rooted in his belief that they fell short of the top-notch quality he looks for, or that they felt like obligatory tracks added to complete an album. Throughout interviews and casual discussion, he has not been shy about expressing these views, and this honesty about his own misgivings offers a rare look into the exacting standards he holds even decades after the songs were written. Looking at the songs from the album with the Beatles, McCartney often speaks plainly about how some tracks came about, especially songs like Hold Me Tight and Little Child. For him, Hold Me Tight was never seen as a great achievement. The band finished it quickly because they needed more songs for the album. He remembers it as a filler, something done just to fill the space. The song did not get special care in writing or recording, and McCartney himself calls it forgettable. He recognizes that the track lacks polish, which sets it apart from some of their more iconic songs. Meanwhile, Little Child tells quite a similar story. Although it's credited to both Lennon and McCartney, Paul openly describes it as a work song, more of an exercise in songwriting than a track meant to stand out. They needed material, and so they made it. Little Child is a reflection of that early period, when the Beatles were trying many things and learning as they went. The song does not hold a special place in McCartney's memory, instead representing a time of experimentation and trial and error. This honest view of Hold Me Tight and Little Child shows how sometimes even famous bands like the Beatles look back and see certain pieces in their catalog as products of necessity rather than inspiration. These songs serve their purpose at the time, helping the album feel complete, but they do not carry the same weight or pride as others from the same era. McCartney's reflections on these tracks highlight that not every creation is special, and that the early Beatles albums sometimes needed quick solutions to keep moving forward. Although Paul McCartney is known for bringing an optimistic and energetic touch to much of his songwriting, his perspective on Your Blues is noticeably different. While he can acknowledge the raw power and the genuine energy that the track delivers, he struggles to feel any personal attachment to it. The main reason behind this detachment is found in the essence of Your Blues itself. Its gritty, heavy blues style, and especially the dark, almost desolate lyrics. These traits simply do not fit with McCartney's general preference for songs that are upbeat and positive, reflecting his philosophy on music as something that should uplift and inspire joy. The song's departure into darker territory was uncharacteristic for McCartney, who commonly sought melodies and words that brought comfort or hope, rather than lingering in emotional shadows. In contrast, his view of What You're Doing reveals a different set of concerns. McCartney criticizes the song not for its mood, but for what he sees as a lack of depth and innovation. He feels it falls below his standards for songwriting, believing it to be a piece created more out of necessity than inspiration. In his eyes, it served as filler to complete the album and meet pressing schedules, rather than a deliberate artistic statement. Without the emotional or creative investment he expects from his own work, What You're Doing becomes an example for McCartney of what happens when process overrides purpose, sacrificing meaningful craftsmanship for the quick solution of simply filling space. This critical take reflects McCartney's own values as a musician. He rarely settles for material that lacks substance or fails to reflect sincere intent. For him, each song should stand on its own, shaped by more than the demands of time or convenience, aiming always for the blend of depth, melody, and innovation that defines his best work. Despite being known for his musical openness and collaboration, Paul McCartney felt disconnected from She Said, She Said. This track, primarily written by John Lennon, showed clear psychedelic influences, both in its sound and its lyrics about shifting perception and reality. The Beatles were deep into experimenting with new sounds and ideas, and this song was a perfect example of that period. However, the recording session for She Said, She Said also highlighted underlying tensions in the group. McCartney, who often contributed heavily to Beatles tracks, had little involvement in this one. Tensions in the studio boiled over, and McCartney left the session before the song was completed. Unlike usual, he did not play bass on the final take, leaving George Harrison to cover that part. This experience left McCartney disliking She Said, She Said, as the conflict and confusion during the recording sessions made him feel out of sync with the rest of the band. The discord surrounding the track contrasted sharply with the usually close-knit creative process that defined much of the Beatles' early work, revealing some of the strains that would later play a significant role in the band's dynamic. Over the years, he has developed a reputation for demanding the very best from his work. Always striving for perfection, he has spent long hours reworking lyrics and melodies until they create the emotional impact he wants listeners to feel. Every part of the music-making process, whether it's writing, rehearsing, or recording, gets careful attention, as he believes that anything less than his personal best is simply not enough. If he writes a song, and it doesn't touch emotions or send shivers down his spine, he won't settle for it. Instead, he keeps searching for the exact words and melodies that match the high standards he sets for himself. Because he aims for music that makes a deep, personal connection, he can be picky, setting aside songs that don't quite meet his expectations. His commitment to only sharing his finest work has not wavered, no matter how many years he's spent in music, or how many successful songs he's already written. Whether collaborating with others or working alone, he always listens with a critical ear, pushing himself and his team for the strongest performances and the richest sound. His dissatisfaction with anything less has driven him to keep reaching higher, always looking to produce music that remains memorable and meaningful for listeners long after the first play. This dedication is a big part of why his songs continue to stick with people, since he only allows what truly moves him to be shared with the world. Over the years, conversations around the Beatles have always included speculation about which songs the band truly loved, and which ones they secretly disliked. After all, even world-famous musicians do not enjoy everything they create. In Paul McCartney's case, the song he disliked remained a mystery for decades, growing into a subject of endless debate among fans. Eventually, he revealed that he never could stand a certain Beatles track, describing it as frustratingly simple and lacking in the sort of nuance he hoped for in their music. He tried tweaking the song in the studio, adjusting melodies, playing with lyrics, and adding layers to make it richer, but each attempt left him even more dissatisfied. Instead of growing on him over time, the song only became more bothersome, especially as it gained popularity with listeners. McCartney admitted that the unpolished lyrics and forced process behind recording the song always colored his opinion, creating a barrier he could never overcome. Even as fans celebrated it as a classic, he found it hard to join in the praise, quietly wishing they had focused on stronger material during those sessions. Hearing his honesty about the creative process gives an inside look at how even legendary artists can feel disconnected from some of their most well-loved work, reminding us that art is often as complicated and unpredictable for its creators as it is for its audience.